Hi, Crimies. I'm your host, MAB, and you're listening to the Coffee and Crime Podcast. First and foremost, I want to wish moms a happy Mother's Day. This especially goes out to the moms who no longer have their child or children with them. This must be such a hard time, and I'm really thinking of you hard today. Also, moms with kids, fur babies, dads pulling double duty, all of the people in a mom role. So I just wanted to quickly drop in there that we still don't have any recent updates for Jack and Lily, but I will update everyone once new information becomes available, as promised. Before I get started with this episode, as always, please listen to the following disclaimer.
The content delivered through this podcast will at times be graphic in nature and describe criminal conduct which includes but is not limited to violence, sexual assault, and homicide. All suspects described in the podcast are considered innocent until they are found guilty in a court of law. I'm not an expert on any subjects covered, I'm just an interested party. The content will be troubling and upsetting to some people, therefore, viewer or listener discretion is advised.
This is another story of something most of us will never, ever understand. Welcome to episode 9, Chloe and Aubrey Berry. Chloe Elizabeth Berry was born on June 4th, 2011, and her sister Aubrey Kate Berry was born January 31st, 2013. At the time of the incident, Chloe was 6 and her sister Aubrey was 4. Most of the court proceedings in the story happen in Victoria, BC. If you're not familiar with Victoria, it's the capital of British Columbia in Canada, and it's the largest urban area on Vancouver Island. In 2019, the population was around 86,000 residents. The city was known for its mild climate, rich history, and natural beauty. If you look at pictures, the views are just breathtaking. It's no wonder, really, that it attracts many tourists. My friend and his mom are actually on a year-long trip, and I think they plan to spend about 3 months on Vancouver Island this summer, so maybe we could invite him on one of our episodes. So when this tragedy happened in Oak Bay in 2017, Oak Bay was known at the time for its picturesque suburban setting, and it's found on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. The population in 2017 was around 18,000 residents, and it's known to be pretty rich with a wealthy economy. Same for this one. The pictures are out of this world. So gorgeous. I want to make my way there someday. So just to provide some background information, Andrew and Sarah, Chloe and Aubrey's parents, really had an acrimonious relationship, and he was always trying to get back at her or trying to hurt her, not necessarily physically, but sort of using the girls as pawns to get what he wanted. Andrew seemed to change after the birth of their first child, Chloe, in 2011. I couldn't find any information as to what the changes were or how Andrew changed, but Sarah just said that he was just different after the birth of Chloe. Andrew had only paid child support for the first year following their separation in 2013. So when Sarah got tired of not receiving financial support to help raise the girls, she engaged the maintenance program and they started to garnish Andrew's wages in 2017. Maybe this is why he quit his job, because with no money coming in for himself, then surely he couldn't give Sarah any money either. So he wouldn't be benefiting her in any way, shape, or form. So let's go back to 2013 when Sarah Cook and Andrew Berry had their second child, Aubrey. Sarah told the Supreme Court in a testimony later that by September 2013, her relationship with her common law partner was, quote, very, very bad, very tense, very strained, end quote. Sarah had actually called the police about an incident which ultimately led to Andrew being arrested and then released on the condition that he would not communicate with Sarah, with the exception of anything directly related to Chloe and Aubrey. Andrew still had access to the girls, and in October 2015, Sarah reported that she suspected inappropriate touching of Aubrey and Chloe to the children's ministry, but the police found no evidence that the touching was criminal or sexual. I'm not sure what that kind of investigation looks like, because if it's literally just inappropriate touching, other than statements, there really is no way to physically prove that. Also, in a 2016 court order, it said that Andrew would share parenting responsibilities with Sarah. This court order also set out the Christmas holiday schedule, as most court orders do, and it stipulated that the parents should only communicate by email unless it was an emergency. Now, it's December 2017. Andrew was at the end of his rope financially because he had just quit his job at BC Ferries. I'm not sure why he quit or what his reasoning was at the time, because he had no plan B, no money coming in, no income. On top of quitting his job, he had had a falling out with his parents and he could no longer count on them for anything. So he was really alone. If this wasn't enough, Andrew had even spent all of his pension funds and no other money was coming in. All his credit cards were maxed out, and he was in overdraft on all of his accounts. I'm not financial shaming anyone either, just to be clear. I'm just pointing out all of the negatives that were piling up in Andrew's life. Sarah had started frantically texting and calling Andrew when he failed to return the girls at noon as per the requirements of their court order. Andrew's parents had arrived at Sarah's house around 2 p.m., and Andrew's dad decided to stay behind while Sarah and Andrew's mom drove over to his apartment in a panic. So they get there, they're like buzzing at the front door repeatedly, knocking on the window, but it's dark in there and no one's answering. This made no sense because the girls should have been home hours ago. So where were they, and where was Andrew? With nothing more they could do, they decided to drive to the police station. Sarah stayed there while police officers headed to Andrew's apartment. When the officers returned, they sat Sarah down, held her tightly, and they said, "The girls have been injured." While she had a glimmer of hope that they were still okay, the police then delivered the terrible news that her daughters didn't make it. They were deceased. So on December 25th, 2017, Christmas Day, Chloe and Aubrey were found dead in their father's apartment. Based on an Abbotsford News article, Andrew kept maintaining that he did not kill the girls. However, people didn't believe him, and after an almost 6-month trial, the jury found Andrew guilty. Evidence later showed that both girls died in their own bedrooms in their father's home where they had been sleeping peacefully. There was blood found all over the inside of the apartment, but absolutely no blood outside, making it pretty clear and pretty easy to determine that the crime had taken place inside the home. Now, I'm warning you, the next part is graphic and gruesome. If you don't want to hear it, I'll pause for a second so you can skip forward. So Chloe, the oldest, was struck in the head, and she was also stabbed 26 times. Remember, this is an innocent 6-year-old child. Aubrey, who was 4, was stabbed 32 times. That's just crazy. And then we have Andrew. Andrew was found naked in the bathtub, the water colored by his own blood. And when he was found, he had stab wounds to the neck, which appeared to be self-inflicted. A knife was found near Aubrey's body, and it looked a lot like the set of knives found in Andrew's kitchen. So, usually 1 and 1 make 2. The girls did not have defensive wounds, which would be consistent with them being disabled and rendered unconscious in some kind of way prior to the gruesome attack. This part is equally disturbing. Wounds were found on the front and back of the girls, so this means that during the attack, he would have had to turn over their little bodies at some point, which is, I can't even imagine. There's also no way of knowing which girl's life he ended first and whether or not he went back and forth between the 2 bedrooms, and we'll never know. Not that it would change the outcome, even if we did, so I guess it's really irrelevant. My only hope is that they were unconscious and didn't have a clue what was happening to them as it was happening. So just to be clear, Andrew had plenty of time to change his mind and make better decisions. But by now, we know that making good decisions is definitely not Andrew's forte. After ending one of their lives, he would have known that they were no longer alive before going and doing the same thing to his other daughter in her bedroom. Andrew had reasons, and good ones at that, to believe that he would not get the girls back after handing them over to their mom this time. The hydro was turned off, so he had no power at the apartment, and he had no money and no way to get it turned back on. As I mentioned earlier, with no income, no money coming in, he wouldn't be able to support himself, let alone his two daughters. And then I thought I read somewhere that the mother sort of remembered one time when she dropped the girls off before this time. And they were saying that they were playing with flashlights because it was dark in the apartment. So obviously everything is hindsight. And now she's realizing that it probably meant that the power had already been turned off at the time, but she didn't know. The girls thought it was a game. So Andrew's testimony was that two men connected to a loan shark named Paul stored what he believed was a bag of drugs in his apartment in March of 2017 in exchange for a delay in the repayment of a loan worth thousands of dollars that Andrew owed because of his gambling addiction. He said he was attacked by a man with dark skin and dark hair, but later the Crown argued his wounds were self-inflicted after a failed attempt to take his own life. They also found a note in the bathroom confirming his intention. So why even bother lying? Like, Andrew, you're busted. And Andrew, why did you have to take your clothes off? Why did you have to get in that tub naked? Could have stayed dressed. I don't know about you, but I would never want to be found naked. Basically, Andrew had the mindset that if he couldn't have the girls, neither could Sarah. The motive for murder was based on a long, simmering animosity towards his estranged partner, Sarah. He believed that she was going to take measures to end their joint custody agreement after Christmas, and he had to do something about that. She couldn't get what she wanted. At some point, the case was taken over by the Vancouver Island Integrated Major Crime Unit from the Oak Bay Police. The only information that was released at the time was that Andrew was found with the girls and that he was taken to the hospital. Needless to say, this crime shook the entire country. The community was also showing support for the first responders involved, which is super nice. A lot of food was dropped off at the station, and they even raised money. I think it was a total of like $1,400. And then instead of keeping this money, the first responders then turned around and donated the money to Chloe's Girl Guide troop. Such an amazing gesture in such a dark time. A huge demonstration and outpouring of support was expressed as friends and strangers showed up at the makeshift memorial outside Andrew's apartment. They left stuffed animals and flowers for the girls. Please take a look at the following video on the day of the funeral for Chloe and Aubrey.
I would like Aubrey and Chloe to be remembered with great joy. Aubrey and Chloe were very joyful, happy girls, and they brought joy to so many of us and so much love. And I hope that as the months and years go by, when people think of Chloe and Aubrey, they think of joy and love.
I think it's hard on a day like today to remember that ultimately they were kids, and this is such a somber occasion, but I mean, we only remember the happy times and where all of our families would be together doing fun things, and you know, that's what I'll be thinking of today. The last several weeks have been very difficult, and we've spent almost all of our time with Sarah, including this morning, and you know, what I'll say of her is that she's shown remarkable courage and grace and dignity in this circumstance, which is sort of beyond comprehension for most of us. So I mean, as a friend, I feel really proud of her, and I think today, with all of our friends and family and even people we don't know, it really helps for her to see what a outpouring of support that she has, and
The Crown started the proceedings by laying out aggravating factors that should all be considered in determining the proper sentencing for Andrew. The jury clearly didn't believe his story that he owed money to a loan shark and that a dark-skinned man with dark hair had ended the girls' lives and injured Andrew. Side note, think for a second. He was the one that owed the money. The girls were innocent. So, if anything, why would somebody come in and silence the girls and then just harm Andrew? He was the problem, not the girls. So, Justice Miriam Gropper said the story didn't make sense and totally defied logic. In court, during the hearing, Sarah said, quote, "This is a nightmare I can never wake up from," end quote. Sarah also added that the loss of her daughters had affected every single aspect of her life, as well as her relationships with people. Even Sarah's aunt, who was high-functioning while living with cerebral palsy, had become bedridden after learning of the girl's death. Quick side note again, sorry, crimies. Cerebral palsy is a group of conditions that affects movement and posture. It's caused by damage that happens while the brain is developing, and it happens before birth. So it's most often detected in infancy or around preschool age. Now, when Andrew's sister spoke in court, he couldn't even look at her. She shared memories that they had. She even mentioned that when they were young, they would play Monopoly. And there was times where the game of Monopoly would last days. And then she sort of indirectly blames herself or wonders if those game nights of Monopoly that lasted for days contributed to Andrew's gambling addiction, which she can't. Andrew's his own person. She can't take blame for that. During all of the victim impact statements, Andrew never looked up once. He did not want to see these people. He was looking down, staring at a yellow legal pad and just writing. So, almost 2 full years after taking the girls' lives, Andrew entered the sentencing phase of the trial. He had been found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder when Chloe and Aubrey's bodies were found lifeless on Christmas Day, 2017. So he faced a mandatory life sentence for each charge because that's how it works in Canada. And then it was up to the court to decide if he would be eligible for parole at the minimum of 10 years or the maximum of 25 years. So of the jury, 6 people recommended 15 years of parole ineligibility consecutively for each murder count. 2 people recommended 10 years to be served concurrently, and 4 had no recommendation. Okay. I mean, to me, if you're going to be a juror, that's kind of part of your job. So I don't know why you wouldn't offer a recommendation, but anyway. Another quick side note here. In 2017, consecutive periods of parole ineligibility were allowed for cases with multiple murders, but it was later found to be unconstitutional. So that's why we don't really hear of this anymore, because it's really no longer a thing. So as mentioned earlier, Andrew and Sarah's relationship was not good. And he killed the girls just hours before he was going to release them back into their mom's custody. Articles say that his resentment was clear in the note that he left, and even after he took the girls' lives. The province's highest court ended up finding that Andrew's actions were appropriate for the sentence of life in prison with no parole eligibility for 22 years. His request for earlier parole eligibility was denied, thankfully, and the law requires a sentence to be proportionate and reflect the moral sort of blameworthiness of the offender. In this case, it did. The justice did recognize that 22 years was at the high end of the range, but also that it was not an unfit sentence for Andrew's crime. It was so violent and so brutal when it was supposed to be a time of pure joy. Andrew has shown no remorse. Sarah also mentioned, quote, "Losing the girls has been the singular worst event in my family's life and has left a hole so huge and so gaping that describing it and the extent of its impact seems impossible," end quote. Again, during testimony, through genuine tears, Sarah explains that the last time she saw the girls alive was when The day after she dropped them off at their father's house, she had gone back to Andrew's apartment to drop off one of Chloe's favorite stuffed animals. Chloe was wearing a pink dragon costume, and both girls asked when they could come back home with her. She told them in 3 days, unless she could get them back sooner. As Sarah left, she told her daughters that she loved them for the last time. Legal experts, along with Sarah, hope changes to Canada's Divorce Act will better protect children. Changes to the law took effect in March of 2021, so they now place more emphasis on the needs of the children during the divorce, hoping that this will result in less legal battles between parents over custody orders. The amendments of the Divorce Act change the way the presence and prospect of violence, including a child's direct or indirect exposure to family violence, is considered. It sort of makes it clear to parents that it's really not about them. It has nothing to do with winning or losing. It's not a game. It's really about the kids and who they should be spending time with. So moving forward, arranging equal parenting should take a backseat to child safety and their well-being. Courts need to be better at recognizing the signs of abuse so that they can make informed decisions. Again, let's go over this just quickly. Andrew was behind on his rent. His power was cut off. He had quit his job and spent all of his savings to support his gambling habit. So how could he financially support the girls? How could he even provide for their basic needs? I struggle to understand how, under these circumstances, Andrew managed to get equal parenting rights. Andrew's self-inflicted wounds. Was his goal just to ever so slowly bleed out in the tub naked? The last bit of legal jargon. In Canada, family law is a shared jurisdiction between the federal, the provincial, and the territorial governments. The Divorce Act is for married couples that are getting divorced, period. The others are for unmarried couples, common law couples, and couples who are separating but not divorcing. So I guess that's the difference between the two. So to end on a high note, I just want to share that both girls were caring, generous, and warm. They were happy and imaginative. Chloe was clever, articulate, wise, and she loved horses. Her little sister Aubrey had recently become very self-assured. She was effervescent and determined. She was a silly, wild-spirited girl, and she loved monkey bars and putting on mom's makeup. They loved the school they attended, and they had many friends there. They were loved, and they will be missed by many. Thank you so much, Crimies, for listening to Aubrey and Chloe's story today. I appreciate you. As always, please hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that these episodes are also available on Patreon and Spotify. Remember, crime is a waste of time. Until next time, bye, Crimies.